Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast. We're your hosts, Monte, Wyatt, and Paul Scieszinski. Wherever you are in life, there is a higher ceiling. This podcast is how you become aware of it and how to take action to push through it. It's time to discover your ceiling. Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast, where we talk about your health, your family, your business. I'm Monte Wyatt.
I'm Paul Scieszinski.
And we have a great show today. Paul's going to introduce our guest.
Yes, we got a great guest here today. We're going to talk about a lot of things that talk about community service, talk about giving in communities, and I think that's going to be it's going to be great. And our guest for today, his family's a big part of the C store here in the state of Iowa in the Midwest, Casey's Stores. They started the Casey's Stores. He's an attorney. He owns a local arena football team. He does a lot of great things. He's also started the Iowa Ship out in Long Beach. We'll talk about that. But we got some great things to talk about, and I want to introduce to you Jeff Lamberti. Jeff, great to have you.
Thank you. Yep, good to be here.
Yeah, welcome. Welcome to the show. Yeah, we call our audience the achiever, and we love having guests on the show that have achieved a lot and influenced a lot. And so our topic today is community influence. And you've done a lot of things in many different aspects, which we're going to hear about. But Paul, as you hear the phrase community influence, what does that mean to you and what comes to mind?
Well, usually in every community, and a lot of people don't realize it, when you see something in a community that has, whether it be a new school or a new hospital or something that's been upgraded, that stuff just doesn't happen. It's usually a group of people to get together, puts a plan together, and brings the money together and implements those ideas. And I'm going to say, 98% of everything in a community is done usually by a group of people. A lot of people don't know about that bring that, and that's what we have here is a community leader that's done a lot of that behind the scenes. And a lot of people don't know those people, but we have a gentleman here that's a big influence, not only in the state of Iowa but around the United States, and I think it's going to be great.
I love that. You're exactly right. Community influence is about having a vision and how do we help others, and how do we making sure that there's a long-term view of that.
That's right.
And because it's not just short-term. And too many people think short-term today. We've got to be thinking about the long-term influence on the communities, on how we're helping the team or how we're helping the people in the communities. So,
that's right.
So welcome to the show. And when you hear the word community influence, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think that similar to what Paul said, it's about being involved and being willing to help your community. And it is true that it's sometimes too small of a group. We'd be better served if we had more. Mm-hmm. But, from my perspective, I was very fortunate to grow up with parents who were about as generous as you can be. So I had great role models, because I find that being involved and being generous don't often come naturally. People are busy, right? They're worried about their job, raising their family, but this was always instilled in us how important it is. And so I do that now as we bring new attorneys into our law firm in Ankeny. We're like, you need to get involved with things, because that's what matters. Yeah, it's about growing your business, but it's also about meeting people and finding out what's going on in your community. And, having spent some time in politics, spent some time on the Racing and Gaming Commission, I like to do deals. I mean, that's part of it, right? And a deal can be a business deal, but a deal can be, as you talked about, Paul, saving the USS Iowa battleship and turning it into a museum. Mm-hmm. That's a big deal, but it was good for the community. It was good for Iowa. And I really like doing those kind of things, whether they're, more business-oriented nonprofits or just purely charitable type. That's just been something I've enjoyed over the years. And it really is about, we're all busy. And quite frankly, the busiest people do the most. So become one of those. And I know it's hard. I've been trying to get off some boards, but every time I get off 2, I add 3. Mm-hmm. But it's important to get involved and to set aside some time. You can still be a good husband, a good wife, a good parent, but get back to your community and get involved and find some time for that. It'll do more for you than you really understand.
Jeff, you brought something up. You're absolutely right in the fact that, number one, first of all, it's always great if you can give. But when you put those boards and teams together, because I know just a week ago you raised over $500,000 in one evening, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But something you've said before, and I've heard you say this, is finding the right people and putting them in the right seats.
That's right. That's right.
Kind of talk a little bit about that. You're probably looking. Usually they're busy people. If you want something done, ask a busy person. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I just went through that. So not too many months ago, I became the chairman of the Italian American Cultural Center of Iowa. And as part of that, we've acquired the Butler Mansion on Fleur in Des Moines, and we want to turn that into a permanent home and banquet halls, museum, and we're going to have to raise a significant amount of money. We own the building, but we got to do the remodeling. And so I was able to essentially go out and build my board that is going to help us do it. And they're very busy people. I had to twist a few arms to get some of them committed, but I also needed to be able to go to the community as we're trying to raise this money and say, this is who I have on my board, and these are people that can help me get it done, and instill the confidence in the various donor groups that we can get this job done. So sometimes though people say, well, okay, I've been in business 34 years. Obviously, I got a background with my dad being a co-founder of Casey's. Well, if I'm a small business owner and I don't have that, how do I become one of those? And you start by being available, and you try to get on boards. You try to get involved in organizations, join your chamber, get involved. And it eventually, you got to put in some time, but the people who are willing to put in the time, it's not just about people who write checks, it's also about people who are willing to do some work, and there's room for everybody. And so don't be intimidated that, they don't want me, or they wouldn't need me.
So now, Jeff, obviously, like you said, your family's a giver. You grew up that way. You graduated from Drake Law School. And you went out and started being an attorney, and then you worked in to help raise funds. You were on the board that gave casino licensing out.
Right.
And kind of tell us some of how you got into those different things.
Yeah, sometimes I don't know how I got into all of this, but I will say from my personal experience, a lot of it came from spending 12 years in the legislature. It was a great experience. I got to meet thousands and thousands of people. I got to get educated on all kinds of issues. But it was really about meeting so many people. And when I got out, I honestly thought I was going to go back and have my little law firm in Ankeny and kind of slow down a bit, because being in politics is a very hectic life, and I quickly got bored. And so I was looking for other things. And if you're looking and if you're interested, they'll find you. And so the first one was the USS Iowa. And every day that I went to work in the Capitol for 12 years, I see that great model in the rotunda of the USS Iowa. So when we got the call that they needed help to try to raise money to save the ship, a friend of mine, Becky Beach, and I said, yeah, we're going to do this. And then I spent 12 years on the board and just got off in the last couple of years. The Barnstormers, so when I was in the legislature, it's the Kurt Warner days, the 90s. I got elected in 95. They came to us, to the legislature, and said, we need some changes in the law, because I was not used to having professional sports, and your workers' comp laws won't accommodate it. So we did it. So I had known about and followed the Barnstormers. Well, I get out of office, and Jim Foster, who invented the game, said, I still have the rights to put a team in Des Moines. Would you be interested in? And so originally I was going to be a silent investor, and I went to about 3 or 4 meetings, and I got tired of going to meetings, and I said, do you really want this to happen? Because if you do, I'll raise the money and put the group of local owners together, and we're going to buy this team, we're going to do it. And 17 years later, I'm the president of the team and chief volunteer. So things will find you. I have a hard time saying no. My wife will tell you that. But also sometimes it does come from my parents. So the Italian American Cultural Center I mentioned, that's been a passion of my dad's for 20 years of wanting to get a permanent home for it. He's 85 now, and I just decided I needed to do this because I want to get it done for him and for my mother and for a lot of the other Italians in the community. Mm-hmm. And others are just the challenge of things that are good for the community that I wanted to be involved in. We talked before we started about On With Life in Ankeny, mm-hmm. which is a head injury facility. I spent many, many years, 25, 30 years on the board there, and I really started as a legacy because my parents helped found On With Life. And then I got on the board as a fairly young person. I was maybe only practicing law a couple of years. But you get touched by the miracles that go on there. People who come to On With Life in a coma and walk out.
It's unbelievable.
And so miracles are going on. And so that just became a passion to help them grow. And so we just concluded a $5 million capital campaign, and I use that as my way to make an exit from the board. I won't make an exit from the organization, but I don't need to be on the board anymore.
Yeah, On Way With Life, a lot of the people that may not know, it's a head injury place, and it's unbelievable. I had an employee that worked for me about 8 years that had a head injury, and that went there. It was unbelievable.
World class.
It is world class. He was injured. He was in Waterloo. They didn't know what to do with him. They sent him to Iowa City for 6 weeks, found out they're getting what they could do. And in Ankeny, Iowa, they had a place called Onward with Life. And he went into there. They didn't know if he was even going to make it. Mm-hmm. And he walked out of there within 4 months. It was unbelievable. It
is. It's nothing short of miracles. They do. I don't know how they do it. I mean, I couldn't do the work, but thank God we have people that, like the employees, the people who do it there. And now they have a program for people who have been diagnosed with Parkinson's. Parkinson's we can't cure, right? We're not going to solve that problem, but we can extend the quality of life, and we're doing it, and we've got lots of success stories. In fact, I tell everybody, people that I'll meet on the street that in some weird way will share with me that they have Parkinson's. Yeah. I will say, do you know about On With Life? You need to go through that program. Yes. Because it's that good. And I hope every doctor that treats people with Parkinson's recommends they go to On With Life. It's called Big and Loud, and it's about keeping the movements and the speech as long as you possibly can, and it does work.
And a lot of people, you may not realize, a lot of it's private funded. So if somebody wanted to fund On Way With Life, who would they get a hold of? Who would they talk to? Because we need more places, because there's only, I believe, about 36 beds for the head injury part of it. We need people. We need people to get involved.
You can get online at just onwithlife.org, and we have a foundation, and you can find our foundation people that way. Easy to find. They're in Ankeny.
Okay, great.
Awesome. I want to hear how you've grown through all of your boards that you've been a part of, your organizations that you've been. What are a couple things that you've learned through the years and grown yourself? Because our audience, again, is the achiever. We break through ceilings. I want to hear how you've broken through ceilings because of these experiences.
Interesting question. So much in a lot of the things that I've done since that are apart from business have revolved around raising money. And after I got out of politics, I was like, the last thing I want to do is raise money. But it's really where you have the impact. And so learning how to just get over the fear of asking, and you get better as you do it. So that's something I've learned and more confident. And I guess the other thing is always take the hardest problem first. It's so natural to say, I don't want to deal with that right now, but it'll fester if you don't deal with it, because it isn't going away. And so I think compared to when I was younger, I'm more inclined to take on the hard problem first, and then life seems a lot easier.
That's wonderful. I think that's a great point, is we always want to do the easy thing first because we don't want to have that stress, but
right.
you get the biggest frog done first, eat that frog first, and you're going to get it.
Because it ends up causing more stress if
Absolutely.
you don't. And I've got a very stressful life because, I say what I haven't learned is how to say no still, although I'm trying. And I also haven't learned to be a great manager of my time because there's not enough hours in the day to get things done. Now, I balance that because I do devote more time to family. My wife and I have a couple grandchildren now, so we spend the time and do all of that. But, you'll still find me at the office 7 days a week. So I haven't done that well, but that's of my own choosing. And a lot of that is because of I still enjoy practicing law. And so everything else has got to be an add-on, and so I do that to myself, but like I said, it's self-inflicted, but I'm not very good at that.
So I'm going to ask you, Jeff, who would you say was probably your biggest influence growing up to give that drive in you to be who you are today? That's
easy. That's my dad. I mean, from all aspects of it. I mean, he built, he started as a 22 or 23-year-old man. He and my mother leased a store that my grandpa and grandmother had built. And it was a forerunner to a convenience store, but they didn't really know it back then. It had groceries and things. Okay. And he's young, and that's pretty intimidating as a 22 or 23-year-old. And then eventually, started Casey's with another gentleman. And you can't imagine the risk. I mean, I've never had that kind of risk in my life. And so, but you see what it means, right? And so people, profit is not a bad motive. Profit is for the people who take risk. And it may not be for everybody, but he took a lot of risk. My mom used to say that when they were building the early stores, they mortgaged everything but my older sister. Yeah. I mean, that's risk, right? And so to see that and how he dealt with it and how he grew a business and how he dealt with employees and problems. I mean, I don't know why I was fascinated as a pretty young person, but I remember sitting at the table as he would review every single store's performance, and that was maybe even up to where they had several hundred, and talk about problems and this franchisee and why they were having a problem, and then how he dealt with that, how he dealt with people. He respected everybody and still does to this day, and he treats everybody the same. Mm-hmm. And they are the most charitable. He and my mom are the most charitable. And that came very natural to him. He never wanted to be a billionaire. Right. And so giving has always been important. And to me, that's really what I want to do as I get older. I'm 60. I want to work less and do more charitable things and get my life structured to do that. But, integrity, treating people well. Now, a lot of that's Iowa-based, right? You find that's just natural, the Iowa nice. But I got to see it every day, and so there's nobody that comes even close to being an influence like him.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's and Don, your dad, Don Lamberti, what a wonderful guy, and I'm fortunate to get to know him over the last few years. But so now that you're raising funds, and you want to talk a little bit about the Belize. You raised over group raised $500,000 in an evening, and it's to educate kids.
Yeah, this is a foundation called the James Albert Arthur Foundation, and I think it's going on about 20 years. It was formed and still mainly run by a law professor of mine at Drake University, and he's the only law professor still teaching. I think he's in his 42nd year, and he's a wonderful professor. And so he's touched the lives of these law students for 42 years, and that's who a lot of the audience on these auctions is. They come from, we had one guy come from California for this auction, and it's because of Jim. So Jim went to Belize. He saw the poverty in southern Belize and said, we can make a difference. In Belize, after about the 7th or 8th grade equivalent to here, if you're going to go to high school, you have to pay. And it costs about $250 US for tuition, books, uniforms, and shoes. And their parents simply don't have it. And these children all write essays about why they want the scholarship. And they live in thatched roof houses with dirt floors, no electricity, no running water. And 6 or 7 years ago, my wife and I went to the first of the auctions, and one of the items we could bid on was to accompany Jim to go to the 4 high schools, hand out the scholarships, meet the kids, meet the families, and all it took was for us to go down there, and they stole our hearts. And now we went from going and being supporters. Now both Linda and I are on the board. We've traveled to Belize, I think, 7 times. We've built buildings. We've built internet centers for a remote high school that didn't have internet access. And so we want to do even more. We're not just sending kids to school, but starting this fall, because of our success the other night on our auction, we will pay the tuition and books and so forth for 300 kids in those 4 high schools. Thing we're working on, and we did raise enough money for, talked about the internet center. So in the rural high school, we built an internet center, did the satellites, did all of that. Well, we had a student here this year who was second in his class and preparing to graduate in May. He got sick and was bleeding from his mouth and nose, and his parents took him to the hospital they had, which is not very good, and I think Belize would admit it wasn't. They sent him home because they couldn't find out what was wrong with him, and 2 days later he died. And so we met with his father when we were there just in June, and we said we're going to try to do something so this doesn't happen again. And so we're going to take the land we have and the internet, and we're going to build a telemedicine center where we can use that satellite we already have and try to partner with, whether it's, like a hospital here in Des Moines, or maybe it's Mayo Clinic or Cleveland Clinic, we think big, but to help those doctors and nurses diagnose and do things where in real time they can see these students. And so we want to make sure that doesn't happen again. But they touch our hearts. These kids so want to go to school. And an interesting story, a few years ago we had been at a house, and we went back to one of our students' homes, and he was introducing us to his siblings, and he said, and I want to introduce you to my new baby sister, Linda. Yeah. And so my wife, Linda, says, oh, you named the baby after me? And he goes, yes, we did. Huh. And the mother doesn't speak English, and we found out later she made a quote that the son translated that, wanted to do it because Linda's a hard worker, she's a helpful person, she's a great lady. And so we've named our baby after Linda, because Linda is not a name in Belize. So I'm probably going to have to put this child through college.
What a great story. I think you could get on the internet, and you can see Jeff and Linda with the people. Where do you have, because I know I've seen it on there.
So if you actually go, so when we dedicated the internet center, we had people from all the villages that make up this high school came, and we had a big festival and did the ribbon cutting. We were on national Belize TV, so I think that's what it is Belize TV, and they filmed the whole thing. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And I think if you go to the James Albert Foundation website,
that's it. That's where
you can find some links. But yeah, it was a big deal in Belize that we were doing this. And even though we operate in the southernmost province, it's a small country. It's only about 450,000. The Prime Minister knows who we are. And in fact, we're going to try to get a meeting with the Prime Minister to see about partnering on the telemedicine with us. But they know when we're in town. They particularly know when Jim is in town. I think he's been to Belize 20-some times. I think he could run for governor if he was a citizen down there. They love him. He's touched literally in Toledo District, which is a state equivalent. I bet he's touched every family. There's only 25,000 people in that community, and we've put like 2,600 kids through high school.
Oh, that's amazing. Monte, I think you could have named it better.
Oh, absolutely.
Influencing communities and helping communities, and not only in Iowa,
all over the world.
All over the world. And it's a perfect example. What you said earlier, you ask a busy person and you get things done, and you knew how to do that, and you learned that from a young age. And some of the things we talk about is, I think this is an easy one for you, as we ask you, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you when you're gone?
Well, I think first and foremost, we all want to be remembered as a good person, that treated people well. And maybe that's not important to everybody, but it's really important to me. And so first and foremost, a good dad, grandfather now. Not so much about if I was a good lawyer. I mean, I'm pretty self-confident in that because I have wonderful clients. I've been doing this for 34 years, and they're my friends. They come back. But that kind of success, it's really more about the other things if I'm able to get this Italian American Cultural Center, it's those kind of achievements that help the community. When I was in the legislature, sure, we all have our political, right? I was a Republican, so I had certain values that I was going to push. But in the 90s, it was a different world. I got to tell you, it was a bit different. And we worked hard together to get positive things done. And when I look back at what I was most proud of, it was the things we got accomplished. I mean, my football team now plays in an arena in downtown Des Moines that I helped build because of legislation. It wasn't my intent at the time. I didn't know that was ever going to be the future. But if you go around the state, and we did the Vision Iowa program, I spent one whole session almost working on nothing but that particular program to bring big projects to the state. So it was about doing deals. The USS Iowa and being able to get that done. I'm like, who gets to save a battleship? Right? And so that's the kind of things I'd like to be remembered for. Not so much, if you make this much money or you do. The one thing I will say is not everybody can write big checks. Everybody can write a check. And some people haven't learned to do that. And I think everybody should, because you get way more out of giving. I mean,
Absolutely.
You just do. I mean, when we go to Belize, it's not about how much money we give. We want to support them. We want to help. We get so much back. And I don't care if it's $10 or $100. Everybody should. And, for a lot of us, it's a religious thing, right? It's part of our core belief. But even if it's not, everybody needs to do it.
So, Jeff, something you said earlier in the podcast, you talked about there's something everybody can give. And you're right. There's some people may not be able to financially give, but they can give their time.
Right.
And those people giving their time, in some ways, it's just as important and maybe even more important because stuff's got to get done too.
Yeah, I used to joke back when in my campaigns, and even that was a lot different world in 1994 or 96 when I was running some campaigns. But I'd always say, I'll take 10 of my really good friends who are dedicated to the campaign over 50 people who will write on something that, they'll get involved, but really won't do anything. And so that's how I ran my campaigns. It was like me and 10 of my friends, and they just worked and worked and worked, but it was a recipe for success. And because there's a lot of people don't want to. And if you can't write big checks, get involved. We're always looking for people that want to do the work.
Right. That's great.
This has been a great show. I think I want to encourage our audience, the achiever, to really think about how are you giving back to your communities? How are you influencing your communities? A few takeaways that I got. Take on the hardest problem first. I think that's amazing. Giving must be a part of everyone's life, and you find a way. You give back. You get more when you give, and I think that's powerful. And you're still learning. You're still learning how to manage your time, how to all of that. But I think that's a powerful thing for everyone to see. Where can they give back? Any other takeaways that you have?
Absolutely. And like Jeff said, when you do those things, it's much better when you're giving than when you're taking. And your legacy, in my view, is going to be as a giver that did multiple things to get things started and to get things completed. And when you're on that side of it, in the boards and stuff that I've served on, you see those people that get stuff done. And I see that in you and what you've done for not only just the state of Iowa, but around the country is really important. And what I think, what I've realized, and I think you touched on it, what you can get involved with. I mean, if you're out there, someone has time but may not have money, there's something for you to do.
There is.
And there's something to improve your community. And, get out there, get on the internet, and find something that's your passion. And you've done multiple passions.
I can't say no. That's and sometimes it didn't even start as a passion. It became a passion as you got involved and you learned. On with Life's Best. I mean, I knew kind of what they did, but then when I got on the inside and I saw what then it becomes a passion. So
well, that's kind of what happened to me. I knew your dad had been a big part of starting that, and you were serving on the board, and until a guy that worked for me for 8 years went through that program. I found the real appreciation of what that serves for the community, and because a lot of times they didn't have places to put people with a head injury.
No, they didn't.
And
that's who started On with Life, a group of parents who had children with head injuries, and they knew they had nowhere, and they certainly had no hope long term, and that's who formed it. And they had so much passion and one of those families was an employee at Casey's. And that's how they got the meeting with my dad. Uh-huh. And they had so much passion, that's why he agreed to get involved and help them get started, because of that. There were no adequate facilities in Iowa.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
That's wonderful. Jeff, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
This has been a fun conversation.
Yes.
Love to hear your involvement in the community, and I want to challenge our achiever to do the same. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next show.
Hit that like, thumbs up.